All right, guys, today we're going to be talking about the impact of immigration, focusing specifically on anti-immigration ideals and policies. So just to kind of review, there's going to be this rise in two different things in the United States with this increase in immigration. The first is going to be xenophobia. Just to review, xenophobia is this fear of and distrust of foreigners coming in, seeing them as different, as other, as not as good as the Americans already in the United States. And we have nativism. Nativism is where you have this push to support those people already in the United States and kind of pushing away immigrants coming in. We're going to have this rise in this race-based science called eugenics. Eugenics is it's a way to determine a superior race. We see this starting to happen more and more in the late 1800s, and we're going to see it kind of increase in its validity in the early 1900s. So scientists are going to use they're going to tie prejudice to race. So they're going to start measuring different facial features, looking at color of skin, the shape of your head, the shape of your nose, how wide set your eyes are. And they're going to use all of these measurements as a way to determine a race's worth. They're going to tie physical characteristics to criminal tendencies, saying the Italians have a certain facial structure that makes them more inclined to become criminals. Or I really hate saying this stuff, but they're also going to tie intellectual abilities, their likelihood of becoming alcoholics or not, for not just immigrants, but also for people in the United States as a way to determine racial superiority. It's going to be used a lot later on. We're going to see it in the rise of, the time period leading up to the Holocaust in Europe. We're going to see it in different racial policies against Native Americans in the United States as a way to justify prejudice and discrimination to different races. This is going to the eugenics, race-based science is also going to lead to different policies. Nativist intellectuals are going to feel that they are justified in limiting certain groups from coming into the United States because they have quote unquote science backing them up. Some of the policies we're going to see come out of this time period are one, the Chinese Exclusion Act. The Chinese Exclusion Act is going to limit any immigration from China to the United States for roughly 60 years. It's also going to limit the civil rights of those immigrants already in the United States, limiting what they can or cannot have access to. They're going to have limitations on their education until the Supreme Court is going to step in. They're also going to have forbid naturalization, so citizenship for Chinese immigrant children who are born in the United States and should be guaranteed this naturalization citizenship, but it's going to be limited with the Chinese Exclusion Act. The Supreme Court is going to come in and say that any people who are born in the United States are citizens, even if they're of Chinese descent. They're going to pass this in 1898 and saying what the Chinese Exclusion Act subcategory about naturalization is illegal, but you're going to see a lot of immigration officials ignoring this ruling. We also see another anti-immigration policy called the Gentleman's Agreement in 1907. So this isn't an official policy. It's going to be more of a mutual agreement between Japan and the United States. There's going to be this understanding where Japan agrees not to issue any passports to Japanese immigrants to the United States, not allowing them to come over and move to the United States, except for more distinguished Japanese individuals like professional men, business leaders. So the United States is going to find a way to really limit the type of immigrants that are coming over from Japan. We also have the Quota Acts of 1920s. The Quota Acts are going to be a lot of different anti-immigration policies. So we have an Immigration Act of 1924, for example. These acts are going to limit immigration from certain countries, kind of being saying there's a certain number of immigrants we will allow from the Ukraine or Georgia or Russia. It's going to focus primarily on limiting immigration from Eastern Europe. This is really going to be spurred by this growing fear of communism. As communism kind of takes hold over in Eastern Europe and Russia, we're going to see this fear of it spreading to the United States. So there's going to be this limitation of immigrants from those countries, even if those immigrants are trying to get away from the communist policies being put into place. We also have this growing fear and prejudice towards Jewish immigrants. And the Jewish populations in Europe tended to be more over in Eastern Europe as well. So it's kind of a way to limit those two groups from coming to the United States. The KKK is going to be a big group that is pushing against immigrants from Eastern Europe because of the distrust of any non-Protestants, also this distrust of any immigrants who are going to look different than the stereotypical British or German immigrants, quote unquote, the old immigrants. Quota Acts in this time are also going to limit all Asian immigrants from coming over to the United States as well. We'll see other anti-immigration policies put into place on top of the Quota Acts. You'll see restrictions limiting, quote, criminal, immoral, pauper, or immigrants likely to need public assistance. So it's a way to say that they're limiting immigrants who will have a negative impact on the United States, primarily criminals. But in practice, it's going to be used to bar impoverished immigrants. So people in poverty tend to be more likely to turn to criminal acts because they can't afford to eat or survive. So it'll be used to say you are more likely to become a criminal if you come to the United States because you are poor, you might have diseases, you might be handicapped, and we don't want to take that on. There's going to be this is going to have a big impact on immigration in the early 20th century. We're going to see immigration kind of drop during this time period, 1910, 1920s. And it's really not going to be until after World War I that we see immigration policies changing, or even World War II, allowing, again, a more open immigration policy that used to be in existence before all of these Quota Acts.